Lord Jesus, it is by grace we are saved through faith. And this faith is not from ourselves, it is a gift from God. It is not by works. We have no reason to boast. As we think about grace today, lead us not to be hurt or offended by your love to others and to us, but rather to rejoice that grace truly is unfair and that you love us no matter what. In your name we pray. Amen. From little on up, kids have this, a built-in fairness meter, I'll call it, which is always watching and is always judging on the distribution of good things, of blessings or of snacks, or of who gets to have the longest turn with the coveted toy that everyone else wants to play with. At least that's how it works in my house, and I remember that's how it works when I was growing up with 3 brothers. Everybody always had their little internal fairness meter on high alert when anything good was coming out. And the same goes when it came to bad things, like getting punished. Punishment had to be fair. We have this fairness meter in us, and the problem is that rarely in life is everything fair. People don't always get the same. One time there might only be enough for one person to have a snack or to have time for one person to have a turn with that toy. And as you get older, you recognize that the world is definitely not fair in the way that good things and blessings are distributed. I had a close friend who back in school got upset, we shall say, or complained to me that there was a girl he lost out to for a scholarship that was very, very important to him. Twice. 2 different scholarships, 2 different years apart. And in both of these cases, he felt he was the far more deserving candidate. He had perfect grades. He was the student body president. He volunteered in the community. He showed great leadership. And he did everything he could to get this scholarship so that he could afford his graduate school. But each time he lost out to the same young woman. And he says the only reason that he lost was because her parents had been, at one time, refugees from former communist Yugoslavia. They came over just before the Balkan Wars and had kind of a dramatic story. Now, she didn't do anything to earn that, but because it was a part of her story, he felt that she, even though she didn't have as good of grades, didn't work as much, didn't try as hard as he did, she always got the scholarships. He thought that was unfair. Was it fair? I don't really know. I wasn't part of that decision. It wasn't really anything for me to have a say in, and yet he liked to tell me how unfair it was. The Apostle Paul today has to confront the idea of fairness when it comes to God's grace in the book of Romans. And he does this because whenever we really sit down and think about grace, there is the inevitable conflict that comes because of our internal fairness meters that each one of us has built into our human nature. And it comes out in different ways in different cultures and at different times in the world. But everybody notices that God does not distribute his blessings equally. There's a lot of inequality when it comes to who gets the good stuff from God. When our internal fairness meter starts going off and saying, that isn't fair that this person or that person gets the blessing instead of me, well, that's why the world can actually feel quite offended at the notion that God is a gracious God. So the problem from beginning to end is simply that grace isn't fair. It never was from the beginning. It wasn't fair in Paul's day, and it's not fair today. When we think about why, what is the reason that certain people receive God's blessings and other people don't? What is the reason that we are so blessed to know Jesus and call him our Savior, to have trust and faith in him, and there are millions, even billions of people in the world who don't? God's grace, of course, being the answer, but it's not a very satisfying one to our human reason. So Paul addresses that issue very head on in Romans chapter 9. And what he's doing is comparing how God's grace came out in the Old Testament to some of the people we all know from reading our Sunday school stories about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and their families. So let's look closely at this to see just how unfair grace can be and try to understand why. Starting from the beginning of our lesson. For not all who are descended from Israel are Israel, nor because they are his descendants are they all Abraham's children. On the contrary, it is through Isaac that your offspring are reckoned. In other words, it is not the children by physical descent who are God's children, but it is the children of the promise who are regarded as Abraham's offspring. For this was how the promise was stated: at the appointed time I will return, and Abraham will have a son. Not only that, but Rebekah's children were conceived at the same time by our father Isaac. Yet before the twins were born or had done anything good or bad, in order that God's purpose in election might stand, not by works, but by him who calls us, she was told, the older will serve the younger. Just as it is written, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. Now Paul shares these two examples of how God's grace worked in choosing Isaac over Ishmael, the child of Abraham through his wife Sarah, as opposed to the child of Abraham's concubine Hagar. And he made this choice before even Isaac was conceived or born. God said, I am going to choose this descendant over Ishmael to receive the blessing of being in the line of the Savior. Second thing that he mentions is how God also chose Jacob, the younger of two twins, Esau and Jacob, to be the one who would receive God's special favor. The older will serve the younger, God had told Rebekah. And the plan was for Jacob to receive the blessing. Now, the moment this happens, the internal fairness meter starts to go off, because when there isn't a clear distribution of who should get what, or we can't do it evenly, then we want to know, well, why? Why is God saying this person gets to have my blessings instead of that person? Especially when human reason, at least in the days of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, would say that the older child should be the one who gets to carry on the family business, whether it's getting the farm or carrying on the line of the Savior. That is a blessing for the older child, for the oldest son anyway. Whatever it is, our human reason says there must be some rational explanation. There must be a reason why God distributes his blessings differently. Because when God decided to hand them out, it didn't come out the same. Now, don't get me wrong, you can be grateful for living in a free country like Canada and the opportunity for us to worship and follow our faith in peace. You can rejoice that you have food to eat and you have means of an income, that you have all the blessings you need to carry out your life. But it's when you start to look around at the other blessings that different people have received that maybe are better than yours, that we start to go, this doesn't quite seem fair. Or even more so, when the kind of blessings we receive are the kind of blessings that need air quotes around them because they don't really feel like blessings at all. Like, for example, when your dishwasher or your refrigerator broke the same week as your car and you don't have money to fix both. Or when you get some kind of autoimmune disease that will be with you the rest of your life and be a cross to bear. Or when you get laid off because of COVID-19, but your coworker who doesn't work as hard as you gets to keep his job. Anytime those sort of blessings come, all the more we want to know why. Why, God, am I being the one who gets this sort of blessing distributed to me while that person gets the better life? If that weren't enough, Paul looks at an even bigger question. And that has to do with who gets to be chosen or elected to be God's very children. Now, in Paul's day, the dispute was between Jews and Gentiles, and why God's chosen people, Israel, though they were descended from Abraham and though they are from the same nation and family as Jesus, why many of them were not going to be saved. And why Gentiles, who had no part of that promise, could now be called God's children, the children of Abraham even. It all just seemed very unfair. It all makes us ask, well, why, God? Why these people and not those? But God's answer, well, his answer isn't all that satisfying. There is no reason. There is no because. That's what we are told. It's just grace. How does Paul put it? He says, what then shall we say? Is God unjust in his choices, in his distribution of blessings of grace? Not at all. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. It does not, therefore, depend on human desire or effort, but on God's mercy. If it doesn't depend on human desire or effort or something in us, but only on God's mercy, then we have to say, along with Paul, there can be absolutely no reason in us why God gave us grace. There is no because. God did not choose you to be a Christian because he knew you would believe or have faith in him while these other people wouldn't. He didn't call you to faith because you were better than other people who have a worse sinful nature. No, it's by grace. He didn't choose Jacob over Esau because Jacob was a more faithful follower and Esau was more worldly. No, it's purely grace. He didn't choose Isaac over Ishmael because of whose mother Isaac was. No, it's purely by grace. Intellectually, though, grace is a terrible answer, trying to explain to our internal fairness meter that just cannot accept the outcome that God would not be fair, that he would not be equal in the way that he gives out his blessings. The Jews in Jesus' day struggled to understand this. They thought, well, because we're Jews, because we're Abraham's children, therefore God must love us. He must accept us. After all, we're part of his people. And now, Paul is talking to these Gentile believers who are getting proud of the fact that they were better followers and they believed in Jesus and the Jews did not. And Paul says to all of us, there is no because. There's nothing about you. It's grace. And when there's grace, there is no because. The fact that there can be no because can be downright offensive. Let me share with you a hypothetical example that there are real life situations for. But imagine a scenario where a very evil man goes out and murders a bunch of people. The people he kills, he takes their life away, he cuts their time short. They don't know about Jesus. They don't believe in God. And the Bible says because of that, therefore, they don't get to go to heaven. They end up in hell, even though they are the victims of the crime. But now this evil man, he goes to prison and realizes his evil ways, and he repents. He turns away from his sin and finds faith in his Savior, Jesus Christ. And God says at the end of his life, even though he did these terrible crimes, His life is washed clean. He gets to go to heaven when he dies. Does that seem fair to anyone? Of course not. Grace is unfair from beginning to end. There is no because with grace. Just as Jesus described in that parable how the workers who worked all day long felt it was terribly unfair that they should work all day long and get paid the same as the workers who worked just an hour. But that was grace. The master wanted to be generous with everyone. If you want to be a Christian, you have to embrace unfairness. You have to take your internal fairness meter off, put it on the ground, and stomp all over it, because God is not fair. As I mentioned in the children's message, if he was fair, if he gave out his blessings to all who deserved it, we would have none. Instead, we would only have the wrath and punishment that our sin deserves. If God was fair, no one would get to go to heaven. But actually, God says he wants to have mercy on whom he wants to have mercy. He wants to be gracious and merciful. And so he unfairly said, I will put all of the punishment, the pardon for your sins paid for when my son dies on the cross. God wants us to see unfairness in a new light, that we can rejoice that God is not fair, that he chose us, even though there's nothing about us, there's no reason for us that he should pardon us and call us to faith and give us baptism and say, now you are my children washed clean, and you belong to me, and you will be my children forever. Yet there's nothing that we can find inside of ourselves to say why. There was a British minister who lived around the time of Martin Luther, a man named John Blatchford, who got arrested in 1553. He was arrested because Queen Mary had come to power, and as a Catholic, she started to persecute all the Protestant ministers, people like John Blatchford, who had subscribed to the ideas of the Reformation. Apparently, he was thrown into prison and was sentenced to death for supposedly or allegedly stirring up a mob in London. Even though that was really true, he was sentenced to death. And as he was awaiting his death, he saw a group of other prisoners who were led off to execution, criminals who actually committed crimes. And he became famous for saying, even though he himself was about to die, there but for the grace of God go I. He understood that there is no reason inside of him that God should have chosen him out of the whole world to say, you are going to believe in me and trust in my grace and mercy. Had he been born in a different family? Had he not heard the gospel? There but for the grace of God, he would go. Grace humbles us to say the same. We talk an awful lot right now in our culture about the idea of privilege, the idea that you're given some inherent advantage that you didn't earn based on what color your skin is, or where you're from, or how much money you have, or whether you're a man or a woman, whatever those categories are. And in a way, that's just a sophisticated way of people bringing up their internal fairness meters and saying, you know, it's not fair that these people get certain advantages over others. When we think about grace, we would have to admit that what God has given us is yet even stronger than this idea of privilege. There is nothing in us that we can say, God, I deserve your grace. There, but for the grace of God, go I, or you. During these past few weeks, we've had a great chance to think about the different ways that living under God's grace changes everything about our lives, walking with God, especially during times of great tension and disorder in our culture. And we talked about how God's grace is so much bigger that it can actually overcome the things that are different about us. We talked about how with grace we see living for God, we see rules in a whole new light. We talked about how we can imitate God's grace and want to follow and live for Him in the way we conduct ourselves online. But perhaps above all, we see in God's blessings, living under God's grace, that there simply is no because. It's just God's love. And He has given that to us. Amen.